Admiral Zyx'norp of the Galactic Confederation's 7th Invasion Fleet was having what humans might call a day, not a good day. Not a bad day, just a day. The kind of day where you wake up, put on your exoskeleton backwards, spill your nutrient slurry all over your tentacles, and then remember you're supposed to invade a Class 12 Deathworld. You know, a Tuesday. As he slithered onto the bridge of the flagship Glorious Conqueror, a name which, in hindsight, might have been a tad presumptuous, Zyx'norp's second in command, Sub-Commander Blorp, turned all 7 of his eye stalks towards him. "Sir, we've reached the Sol system. Earth is within range of our long-range scanners." Zyx'norp suppressed a sigh. He'd really been hoping for a nice, easy conquest, maybe a Class 3 paradise world with beings made of sentient gas. But no, High Command just had to assign him to Earth. He'd heard stories about Earth, terrible stories. Stories that made his exoskeleton want to molt and hide in a dark corner. "Very well, Blorp. Begin the standard invasion protocol. Scan for defenses, analyze their weaponry, and for the love of the Great Void, make sure we're cloaked. I don't want a repeat of the Zeta Reticuli incident." Blorp's skin flushed a deep shade of embarrassed chartreuse. "That was one time, sir. How was I supposed to know their satellites could detect us if we broadcast our entire invasion plan on all frequencies? It's called common sense, Blorp. Look it up in the neural database sometime." As the crew bustled about, preparing for what they assumed would be yet another glorious conquest for the Galactic Confederation, Zyx'norp settled into his command pod. He pulled up the dossier on Earth, skimming through it with a growing sense of unease. Let's see. Gravity 9.8 ms2. That's practically a black hole. Atmosphere. Mostly nitrogen and oxygen. Great Void, they breathe corrosive gas. Temperature ranges from -89.2 dC to 56.7 dGC. They live in these conditions. Blorp, ever helpful, chimed in. "Oh, it gets better, sir. Did you know they're mostly water? And their planet is 71% covered in the stuff. They practically live in acid." Zyx'norp felt his lunch of nutrient slurry threatening to make a reappearance. "Remind me again why we're invading this hellscape." "Well, Sir," Blorp began, his voice taking on the tone of someone who's about to say something incredibly stupid. "High Command believes that if we can conquer a Class 12 Deathworld, the rest of the galaxy will finally take us seriously." "Ah yes, because nothing says take us seriously like getting our tentacles handed to us by a bunch of barely sapient apes on a planet that's actively trying to kill them." Despite his misgivings, Zyx'norp knew he had a job to do. "All right, let's get this over with. Blorp, send down a scout team. Full environmental suits, top-of-the-line weaponry. I want eyes on these humans." As the scout ship descended towards the blue-green orb of death below, Zyx'norp couldn't shake the feeling that this invasion was going to go about as well as a Fnargian in a spice mine. Meanwhile, on Earth, specifically in the picturesque wilderness of Alaska, John Bear Puncher McGraw was having the time of his life. Now, you might be wondering why anyone would have the nickname Bear Puncher. Well, stick around, folks. You're about to find out. John was what you'd call a mountain man, if by mountain man you mean certifiably insane adrenaline junkie with a beard you could lose a family of squirrels in. He'd moved to Alaska seeking the thrill of living off the land, facing nature in all its raw, unforgiving glory. Little did he know he was about to face something a bit more extraterrestrial. As John hiked through the dense forest, humming a jaunty tune that sounded suspiciously like "I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay," he remained blissfully unaware of the alien scout ship that had just touched down a few hundred meters away. The alien scouting party, led by the intrepid Red, hopelessly out of his depth Lieutenant Squiggles, emerged from their ship in full environmental suits. They looked like a cross between the Michelin Man and a disco ball, with tubes and wires sticking out at odd angles. "Great Void," Squiggles muttered, his voice distorted by the suit's comm system. "This planet is even worse than the briefing suggested. Look at all these trees," Sir, one of his subordinates offered. "Yes, trees. Massive columns of cellulose and lignin, jutting up from the ground like nature's middle finger to the concept of a sensible, flat landscape. And the smell. It's like fresh air, sir. Exactly. Disgusting. How do the natives stand it?" As the alien scouting party bumbled their way through the underbrush, making about as much noise as a herd of drunken elephants tap dancing on bubble wrap, John's finely tuned wilderness senses picked up on the disturbance. Well, he chuckled to himself, stroking his magnificent beard. "Sounds like we've got ourselves some tourists. City folk, probably. This ought to be good." John decided to follow the sound, partly out of curiosity, and partly because he hadn't had a good laugh in weeks. As he crept through the forest with all the grace and stealth of a, bear puncher, he caught his first glimpse of the tourists. Now, John had seen some strange things in his time in Alaska. He'd seen a moose playing chess with a beaver he'd sworn off moonshine after that one, and he'd even once witnessed a salmon swimming upstream while solving a Rubik's Cube. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight of 5 shiny, bulbous figures waddling through the forest like reject extras from a low-budget sci-fi movie. Well, I'll be damned, John whispered to himself, barely containing his laughter. Looks like Comic-Con came to Alaska, and nobody told me. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Squiggles and his team were having what could generously be called technical difficulties. Sir, one of the scouts whined, "My suit's external sensors are going haywire. It says the temperature is 20 deg. That can't be right. Surely we'd be on fire." Squiggles sighed, a sound that came out like a deflating balloon through his suit's speakers. No, that's correct. Apparently this is what passes for mild on this forsaken rock. But sir, how do the natives survive? Do they have some kind of internal cooling system? According to the briefing, they regulate their temperature by excreting water through their skin. They call it sweating. There was a collective sound of disgust from the scouting party. One of them actually gagged. As the aliens continued their clumsy exploration, John decided it was time to introduce himself. After all, it wasn't every day you got to mess with what were clearly aliens pretending to be terrible cosplayers. Or terrible cosplayers pretending to be aliens. Either way, this was going to be fun. Stepping out from behind a tree, John called out in his friendliest, most "I'm definitely not about to mess with you" voice. "Well, howdy there, strangers. Y'all look a little lost. Need some help." The reaction was immediate and hilarious. The alien scouting party jumped well, more like wobbled in surprise, spinning around to face John with all the grace of a drunken ballerina wearing flippers. "Great void," Squiggles exclaimed. "It's a native. Quick, assume non-threatening postures." What followed was perhaps the least non-threatening display in the history of the universe. The aliens began to wave their arms, or what passed for arms, in their bulky suits in what they probably thought were soothing gestures, but which looked more like they were trying to swat away invisible flies while having a seizure. John, for his part, was having the time of his life. He'd met some strange characters in his years in the wilderness, but these folks took the cake, ate it, and then asked for seconds. Now, he said, barely containing his laughter, "No need to get all excited. I'm just a friendly neighborhood mountain man. Name's John McGraw. But folks round here call me Bear Puncher." The aliens froze. Their universal translators struggled for a moment before spitting out the meaning of Bear Puncher. When it finally clicked, there was an audible gulp from inside their suits. Squiggles, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the situation, stepped forward. "Greetings, Bear Puncher. We come in peace. We are simply tourists. Yes, tourists. Here to observe your quaint little your lovely planet." John raised an eyebrow. "Tourists, huh? Must be mighty hot in them suits. Why don't you take 'em off and enjoy our lovely planet properly?" The aliens collectively took a step back. "Oh no," Squiggles said hastily. "We're quite comfortable. Very, very comfortable. In fact, we have a rare condition. Allergic to fresh air," John offered, his grin widening. "Yes, exactly. Terribly allergic. Break out in hives and everything. Nasty business." John nodded sagely. "Ah, see. Well, that's a darn shame. You're missing out on some mighty fine air up here. Best in the world, if you ask me." As John bantered with the increasingly nervous aliens, none of them noticed the large, furry shape emerging from the underbrush behind them. None of them, that is, except John, whose grin somehow managed to get even wider. "Say," John drawled, "I don't suppose any of you fine tourists would like to see why they call me Bear Puncher, would ya?" Before Squiggles could formulate a response which, let's be honest, would have probably been something along the lines of "Great Void," no, a deafening roar split the air. The aliens spun around again, with all the grace of a drunken ballerina, but this time the ballerina is also on fire to find themselves face to face with 800 pounds of angry grizzly bear. Now, if you've never seen an alien panic, let me tell you, it's a sight to behold. Imagine a group of sentient garbage bags trying to run in 6 different directions at once, while screaming in a language that sounds like a cross between a dial-up modem and a cat coughing up a hairball. That's about half as funny as what was happening in front of John right now. Squiggles, showing the leadership skills that had rocketed him all the way to the lofty rank of lieutenant in the Galactic Confederation's renowned cannon fodder division, immediately implemented the time-honored alien invasion tactic of scream and run away. Unfortunately, in his panic, he ran straight towards the bear. John, seeing that things were about to get a bit too real, decided it was time to live up to his nickname. With a whoop that would have made Tarzan proud, he charged straight at the bear. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely he's not actually going to punch a bear. That's insane. That's suicide. That's pretty on brand for a guy called Bear Puncher, and you'd be right on all counts. As the aliens watched in horror, and, if we're being honest, a bit of fascination, John McGraw, all 6 and 250 pounds of him, wound up and delivered a haymaker straight to the bear's jaw. Time seemed to stand still for a moment. The bear looked surprised, then confused, then, if a bear can look impressed, it looked impressed. Then it did something that shocked everyone present, including John. It sat down on its haunches, shook its head as if to clear it, and then held out a paw as if to shake hands. John, never one to leave a handshake hanging, reached out and shook the bear's paw. "Good fight, old boy," he said, as casually as if he'd just finished a friendly boxing match and not a life-or-death encounter with one of nature's perfect killing machines. The bear, seemingly satisfied with this show of respect, gave what could only be described as a nod, turned around, and lumbered back into the forest, presumably to find someone who appreciated its talents more. John turned back to the aliens, who were standing stock still, their suits making small whirring noises, as if trying to process what they'd just witnessed. So John said, brushing off his hands, "That's why they call me Bear Puncher. Any questions?" Back on the glorious Conqueror, Admiral Zyx'norp was having what humans would definitely call a bad day. He stared at the video feed from the scouting party's suits, his mouth, or what passed for a mouth in his species, hanging open in shock. "Blorp," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "please tell me I didn't just watch a human punch a Terran apex predator in the face, with his bare hands. And when?" Blorp, looking equally shell-shocked, could only nod. "I'm afraid so, sir. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was, laughing while he did it." Zyx'norp slumped in his command pod. "Right. Okay, let me get this straight. We've invaded a planet where the dominant species breathes corrosive gas, drinks acid, and punches apex predators for fun. Is that about the size of it?" "That seems to be an accurate summary, sir. Yes." There was a long pause as Zyx'norp considered their options. Invade a planet full of beings who treated Mortal Kombat with terrifying monsters as a leisure activity, or go home and face the ridicule of the Galactic Confederation for chickening out. It was a tough choice, but Zyx'norp prided himself on being a rational being, and right now rationality was screaming at him to get the hell out of Dodge. "Blorp, send a message to High Command. Tell them Earth is under the protection of the Galactic Confederation now. Yes, that's it. We've decided to protect these poor, defenseless humans from the horrors of the galaxy." Blorp tilted his eye stalks in confusion. "But sir, they seem perfectly capable of." "That's an order, Blorp. And make it sound heroic. Throw in some stuff about noble savages and our burden to uplift them. They eat that stuff up." As Blorp scuttled off to compose the message, Zyx'norp turned back to the video feed. The human, this Bear Puncher, was now regaling the terrified scouting party with tales of his other exploits. Apparently punching bears was just the tip of the iceberg. ... And that's how I wrestled an entire wolf pack into submission and became their honorary alpha, John was saying, his chest puffed out with pride. "They still come round for barbecues every now and then. Make great babysitters, actually." Zyx'norp felt a shudder run through his exoskeleton. Yes, protecting Earth was definitely the right call. He had a feeling that if they tried to invade, it wouldn't be the humans needing protection. Back on Earth, John was having the time of his life. These tourists were the best audience he'd had in years. Every story he told was met with gasps of horror and disbelief, which only encouraged him to embellish even more. ... And that's how I ended up riding a moose through downtown Anchorage, John concluded, slapping his knee and letting out a belly laugh that echoed through the forest. The police weren't too happy, but hey, sometimes you gotta improvise when your truck breaks down and you're late for your sister's wedding. Lieutenant Squiggles, who had been growing increasingly pale as one can get inside a shiny environmental suit, finally managed to squeak out a question. Mr. Bear Puncher, sir. Are all humans like you?" John stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Like me? Nah, I'm one of a kind. But tough? Yeah, you betcha. We Alaskans are a hardy bunch, but folks all over Earth have their own brand of crazy. You should see what those Australians get up to. Now there's a bunch that'll make you question your sanity." The aliens exchanged worried glances. Their suits' internal communications crackled to life as they discussed this new information in what they thought was privacy. "Did you hear that?" one of them hissed. "There's a whole planet of these maniacs." "Maybe they're not all like this," another offered hopefully. "Maybe he's just an outlier." An outlier, Squiggles cut in. He punched a bear. "For fun. Even if he's 1 in a million, that still means there are over 7,000 humans just like him on this planet." As the aliens continued their panicked discussion, John watched with amusement. He might not have been able to hear what they were saying, but their body language was clear enough. These folks were scared out of their wits, and for the life of him, John couldn't figure out why. Sure, he'd punched a bear, but that was just Tuesday for him. No big deal. Deciding to put his new friends at ease, John clapped his hands together, making the aliens jump. "Say, you folks look like you could use a drink. Why don't you come back to my cabin? I've got some homemade moonshine that'll put hair on your chest." Assuming you have chests under those fancy suits of yours." The aliens' internal comms erupted in a cacophony of panicked voices. "Moonshine? Is that some kind of weapon? Hair on our chests? Is it weaponized hair? Do humans shoot hair as a defense mechanism?" "I knew it. They're trying to poison us." Squiggles, realizing that their cover was rapidly disintegrating, decided to take drastic action. "Thank you for your generous offer, Mr. Bear Puncher, but I'm afraid we must decline. We have a strict schedule to keep. Very important tourist things to do, you understand." John raised an eyebrow. "A schedule? In the Alaskan wilderness? Well, ain't that something? You city folks sure do like to complicate things, don't ya?" As Squiggles fumbled for a response, a crackle came through the aliens' comms. It was Admiral Zyx'norp, and he sounded, "Well, if aliens could sweat, he'd be sweating bullets." "Attention scouting party," Zyx'norp's voice rang out, barely concealing his panic. "Return to the ship immediately. The mission parameters have changed. I repeat, return to the ship immediately." John, of course, couldn't hear this. All he saw was his new friends suddenly perk up like meerkats who'd just spotted a hungry eagle. "Well, Mr. Bear Puncher," Squiggles said, his voice an octave higher than before, "it's been a pleasure, truly it has, but we really must be going now. Thank you for the enlightening experience. We've learned so much about your charming planet." John grinned. "I'll be leaving so soon? Well, don't be strangers now. If you're ever in the area again, just ask for Bear Puncher. Any local can point you my way." As the aliens began to waddle away as fast as their bulky suits would allow, John couldn't resist one last bit of fun. "Oh, and watch out for the drop bears," he called after them. "They're extra feisty this time of year." The aliens froze mid-step. "D-drop bears," one of them stammered. "Oh yeah," John said, fighting to keep a straight face. "Nasty critters, like regular bears, but they drop on ya from the trees. Silent killers they are. But don't you worry, I'm sure those fancy suits of yours will protect ya." "Probably." With a collective whimper, the alien scouting party broke into a run, crashing through the underbrush with all the grace of a herd of drunken rhinoceroses. John watched them go, tears of laughter streaming down his face. "Why all come back now, ya hear?" he called after them, before dissolving into another fit of laughter. Back on the glorious conqueror, Admiral Zyx'norp was pacing back and forth, leaving a trail of nervous slime in his wake. The scouting party had just returned, and their report was, well, concerning would be putting it mildly. "Let me get this straight," Zyx'norp said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Not only did this bear puncher defeat a local apex predator with his bear appendages, but he then invited you to consume mind-altering chemicals and warned you about carnivorous ursines that attack from above." Lieutenant Squiggles, who had removed his helmet but still looked like he wanted to crawl back into his environmental suit and never come out, nodded miserably. "Yes, sir." And he seemed to find the whole experience enjoyable. Zyx'norp slumped into his command pod, all 7 of his hearts racing. Blorpy called out, "Tell me you've sent that message to High Command." Blorp slithered over, datapad in tentacle. "Yes, sir. I've informed them that we've decided to extend our protection to Earth, citing their unique cultural practices and fascinating biological adaptations as reasons for preservation." Good, Zyx'norp muttered. "With any luck, they'll buy it, and we can get out of this system without losing face. Or tentacles." Just then, a beeping sound came from the ship's communication array. Blorp's eyes widened. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. From High Command." Zyx'norp felt all three of his stomachs drop. This was it. Either they'd bought the story, or he was about to become the laughingstock of the Galactic Confederation. With a deep breath, or what passed for a breath in his species, he signaled for Blorp to put the transmission on screen. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Grand Admiral Zyx'norp, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Confederation's invasion fleets. His tentacles were writhing with what Zyx'norp hoped was excitement rather than anger. Admiral Zyx'norp, Zyx'norp's voice boomed through the bridge. "We've received your report on Earth. I must say we're impressed." Zyx'norp blinked in surprise. "Aye, impressed, sir." Indeed, Zyx'norp continued. "Your decision to preserve this Earth and its inhabitants shows remarkable foresight. A species capable of defeating apex predators in unarmed combat, consuming corrosive substances for pleasure, surviving in environments that would kill most sentient beings. These humans could be valuable allies in our future conquests." Zyx'norp felt a wave of relief wash over him, quickly followed by a surge of confusion. "Allies, sir, but they're barbarians, maniacs, they punch bears." Zyx'norp's tentacles waved dismissively. "Details, Admiral. Think of the bigger picture. Imagine unleashing a squad of these bear punchers on our enemies. Why, we'd be unstoppable." As Zyx'norp continued to extol the virtues of their potential new allies, Zyx'norp exchanged a worried glance with Blorp. They'd avoided becoming the laughingstock of the Confederation, true, but somehow they'd stumbled into something far, far worse. Therefore, Zyx'norp was saying, "Your new mission is to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. I want you to learn everything you can about these humans, their strengths, their weaknesses, their bear-punching techniques, everything." Zyx'norp felt his slime run cold. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm not sure that's an order," Admiral Zyx'norp interrupted. "Make it happen. I expect regular reports." Zyx'norp out. As the transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence, Zyx'norp turned to Blorp. "Well," he said, his voice hollow, "it looks like we're going to be spending a lot more time on Earth." Blorp, ever helpful, chimed in. "Should I prepare the diplomatic uniform, sir? Perhaps something bear-resistant?" Zyx'norp just stared at him. "Blorp," he said slowly, "I want you to know that if we survive this mission, I'm going to personally ensure that you spend the rest of your career cleaning waste extraction units on the most remote outpost I can find." "Noted, Sir," Blorp replied cheerfully. "Shall I begin composing our first diplomatic message to the humans? Perhaps something along the lines of 'Take us to your bear puncher.'" As Blorp scurried off, narrowly avoiding the datapad Zyx'norp threw at him, the Admiral slumped back in his command pod. He had a feeling that this was the beginning of a very long, very strange diplomatic mission. Meanwhile, back on Earth, John Bear Puncher McGraw was sitting on the porch of his cabin, sipping his homemade moonshine and chuckling to himself. Those tourists in their shiny suits had been a hoot, no doubt about it. As he watched the sun set over the Alaskan wilderness, he couldn't help but feel that things were about to get a whole lot more interesting around here. "Yep," he said to himself, raising his jar of moonshine in a toast to the darkening sky. "I reckon those fellas will be back. And next time I'll have to introduce Ian to my pet Wolverine. Now that'll be a story worth telling." As if in agreement, a wolf howled in the distance, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a bear's grumble. Just another night in the life of John McGraw, the man who punched bears, befriended wolves, and unwittingly became humanity's first contact with alien life. Little did he know, up in orbit, a very nervous alien admiral was trying to figure out how to explain to his superiors that Earth's official representative was a man who considered wrestling with apex predators a form of light entertainment. The stage was set for a diplomatic mission, unlike any other in galactic history. The Galactic Confederation was about to learn that when it came to humans, and especially when it came to John Bear Puncher McGraw, the old rules simply didn't apply. As for John, well, he was just looking forward to his next adventure. After all, in his book, any day you didn't have to punch a bear was a day not lived to its fullest. And so, as the stars twinkled to life in the Alaskan sky, two very different worlds prepared for a collision course. The Galactic Confederation, with all its advanced technology and careful planning, was about to meet the chaotic, adrenaline-fueled whirlwind that was humanity at its finest or craziest, depending on your perspective. One thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again.